Hello, Dave and Tim here for another single malt review. Today we venture forth unto Islay for a bit of peat.
Yes, indeed, more than a bit, I suspect.
Yes.
We have done Kilchomans in the past, more than one, but somehow we have contrived to do just about every weird Kilchoman out there. A couple of one edition specific to our hometown only. We had a Dramfest edition, and then I think we had a funny finish that came out once. We've never actually done their standard release, which is their Machir Bay. So probably about time that we look at what is really quite a fabulous and up and coming whisky. So have a wee crack.
Yeah, we've neglected the
this
core
one.
range a bit, but Kilchoman do quite a bit of variety, and this is one of their stalwarts of the range.
Well, yeah, Machir Bay, as they call it. It's a no age statement release, and it's probably, I mean, they have a fairly static core range now. They have their Loch Gorm, which is their sherry matured, but this one is close to a standard Kilchoman as you can get. They do their Loch Gorm, they do their 100% Islay, which is from Islay Malt, and this one are the two sort of core bottlings, and this one is the cheapest and the most available. It used to be a little bit stronger, but they've normalised down to 46%. This is a pretty recent bottle. This was bottled earlier this year, in March, in fact. Quite good information there, actually. And what it is a very, very new Islay distillery of the quite a new category, the farm distillery, sort of a class of things in terms of it's really, really very, very small. It's family owned and family run, as far as I'm aware, and they make a teensy tiny little bit of whisky. And it all goes into Kilchoman, does not go into blends.
2005, wasn't it, that they
I think
got
just about, yeah. And they had not without their pitfalls along the way. Funnily enough, a English family living on the Isle of Islay there, and still pretty much just a family operation.
Oh, English man and Scottish wife, I believe.
And it's pretty classically produced. John McClellan, in fact, and Anthony Wills. John McClellan being the distillery manager, and Anthony Wills being the English chappie there, who started the company. And really, they're just sort of going all in for getting as much Islay character as you can into one bottle, and they really, really do. I don't know what their ppm levels, their parts per million phenolics are, but they must be really, really well up there, because this sits alongside sort of Ardbeg in terms of something that is all peaty all the time.
I think it possibly helps that they go for a lot of relatively young whisky. They've been quite vigorously, well, not opposed to, but avoiding age statement whisky so far. Remember, it's been like a stated goal they'd go for is make whisky blends which they like, rather than go for specific ages.
I think if they were to release an age statement whisky with, that didn't have a 5 on it, they would need to be a bigger operation, because Kilchoman is surprisingly available considering what they produce. So I think they are just letting too much whisky out the door to really have any old stock left. I'm sure they've got a wee bit, and I'm sure there will come a day when we'll see older Kilchomans, and that will be fascinating and probably very expensive to see. But as it is, I think they're selling everything they're making, which is good of them, because Kilchoman is not an expensive Islay whisky, considering the tiny production that they produce. So yes, I just don't think they have the stock to keep up with older.
In the past, I've been slightly critical of the never make an age statement approach, but I'm beginning to appreciate the fact that it means you're consistently going to get a very vibrant, extremely fiery, punchy, young and expressive whisky every time.
Well, Islay whisky, as we have seen time and again, doesn't need a lot of age to be to do what it does.
But
best.
you can soften and mellow an Islay whisky into something really exquisite with a lot of time. But at the other end of the spectrum, you've got the young stuff. You know what you're going to get, and it's going to deliver it in spades, as we've seen in previous Kilchomans. Anyway, that's a lot of talking. Let's get on to some sampling.
So on nose, it reminds me just a little bit of Colilla because of the lemony nature. There's quite a tangy citrus quality to that, and the rest is just hugely peaty.
It's a very sea salty peat.
It's very, very peaty, and it's got that sort of slight, sort of almost sweet and sour Islay peat. It's absolutely unmistakable.
Yeah.
And that's really all there is to say about the nose. That's fairly, very, very, very primary, and it does sort of taste, smells of what it smells of all the way.
If I recall right, the Machir Bay, at least this release, is kind of sherry dominant. There's some bourbon there, but the majority of the casks are sherry. I could be wrong about it. Happy to be corrected if I am.
I really don't know. I mean, off the top of my head, just judging by the colour and the nature of the whiskey, I would have said this is, if not exclusively bourbon, then at least bourbon dominant. But, I mean, I haven't seen any information to the contrary or likewise.
Yeah. Then again, we've had like 8-10-year-old bourbon matured Islay whiskies, which are about the same colour too. So this is probably younger than that by a significant way.
Speaking of colour, non-coloured, non-chill filtered, so that's good to see.
Again, with Kilchoman producing to a consistent standard.
So, Kilchoman for me is, the real tell for it is, it smells really, really dry, just a little bit of sweet on the smoke, but it smells like a whiskey that's going to just be manifestly dry, and on the palate it's not. It's quite a sweet dram, and I don't know how it manages that, because it's only sweet for a fleeting moment before the peat really catches up and everything just catches fire, and then it's a very, very peaty whiskey. But that sort of initial burst of sweetness is sort of what makes Kilchoman in terms of telling it apart from other Islay whiskies, which is
kind of like
very,
there's
very hard.
a layer of sweetness just surfing on that wave of explosive peatiness. So it washes over your tongue first, then gets supplanted by the thick, oily, almost bitumen-like peatiness.
Bitumen is a good call on that one. It's a very bituminous, very coaly, coal tar type peat.
What that flavour reminds me of, the initial peaty hit, it reminds me of the smell of a tar-steeled road on a very hot summer's day. Depending where you live, your experience may vary, but
it's a very mineral peatiness, and that's where it diverges. The nose may be a bit similar to Colilla, but Colilla has a much more organic, and in terms of organic, I mean actual living things. It's got much more of a fishy, smoky bacon kind of a thing going on.
Lots of heavy, old jute rope on a wharf.
Yeah. This is very, very chemical, but not in a derogatory way. It is, as you say, asphalty and coaly, and it's an industrial whiskey, I suppose.
Perhaps an effect of being so young, those peaty elements haven't been dulled by interaction with the wood for long periods.
And it's for a very, very young whiskey. I mean, this is probably... It could be more than 10 years old, but I don't think it is.
It's unlikely.
For the reason that I stated earlier, I think they're selling all their whiskey, so they're not aging a great deal. This tastes to me like whiskey hovering around about I don't know, 6 to 8 years old. We'll say is probably what it speaks to me of, and that's perfectly appropriate for Islay spirit.
After now that a bit of time's passed, I'm getting a good kind of fruity finish on this. Some tangy grapefruit, melons, mangoes, bit of a tropical buffet there. It's going to need a generous hit of water though to help my...
Water should make that, any fruit in there, it should make it a bit more obvious.
May have gone overboard on the water then, but we'll see.
That makes a pretty huge difference. That sweetens up the palate quite dramatically. Sort of pushes that smoke into the background a wee bit, and now there's quite a distinct fruitiness. The official tasting notes mention first vanilla and butterscotch, and those are two things I really don't get. A little vanilla, I suppose, just because there's always a kind of a default amount of vanilla for things that have been aged in wood, but certainly not butterscotch. To me, those are flavours on a kind of a smooth, rounded whiskey. It's a very pointy, very fresh whiskey, and though there's fruits in there, they're quite acid, quite juicy, fresh fruits. They're not. It's not speaking to me in that particular way. So I suppose that's just differences in palates there. But
smelling that or adding water, I'm getting at first a kind of an alarming hit of chlorine, like swimming pool chlorine. So I'm going to try that, taste it, see what we get now.
Though it sort of drives some of the smoke away from the palate, it really only makes it stronger on the nose. It's quite an interesting juxtaposition.
Oh, yeah, that softens the edge of a peat, but brings out a kind of a mineral quality. If anything, it reminds of have you ever had water that's been boiled in a very old lime scaled kettle. That kind of mineral aspect to it is what I'm getting
No,
at.
I can't say I have necessarily, but I certainly would agree that it's a very mineral, very elemental style of peated whiskey. Very, very coaly. I don't know where their peated malt comes from. Probably where everybody else does, unless you're dealing with the 100% Islay. But it is quite uniquely dry.
Well, I may have overwatered that, but if anything, the fruit is now even less evident than it was before. I've cut through peatiness, but it's also subdued the fruit. So those fruity qualities were there in more abundance at a higher strength.
Well, we could go on, but I feel Mr. 10 Minutes coming up to point fingers at us. So scores for this one. I do like this. It's not my favourite Islay, but it's an Islay that I respect a great deal because of the way that they do things and the company itself, which I really shouldn't allow to colour my score. So I'll try to remain objective in that respect. This one is an 85 from me. It's pretty solid Islay stuff, but not absolutely my favourite. It's just a little bit dry for me.
I also like Kilchoman having such a unique design philosophy and a way of doing things, and having made such a mark for themselves after a comparatively very short time in existence as a company. This one for me is an 86. It is well-rounded, it's explosive, it's confrontational, as well as being a very young, even a no-age statement whiskey. So, big marks from me.
So there you go, and now we finally have the normal Kilchoman. If you're interested in these weird, abjectly unavailable reviews of Kilchoman, you will have to go way, way, way back in the playlist, because they were, I think, some of our very earliest ones. Yes. I think the Dramfest edition may have been one of our first videos.
Maybe video 3 or 4. I still have some of it at home.
It's in the 1 to 10s. Well, that'll
be, I think, like a 100% port matured.
Something very, very odd.
Alarming and quite...
Goodness knows how collectible it would be today if it was never opened. Anyway, this was the Single Malt Review. We're going to be back with another Islay of some mystique coming up next. So stay tuned. Slàinte.